Okay, so a few topics of conversation that I wanted to touch on today. A few things kind of going on that have caught my attention in the MMA world. Obviously, this Saturday we have Israel Adesanya versus Nasruddin Imavov, and I spoke about that on the last episode. So I am going to focus on the other topics right now, and then I'll do a recap of that on the next episode. Since I already kind of gave my thoughts on the card. I think it's actually a better card to me than the next pay-per-view, so I'm excited for it. But so the first topic that I wanted to dive into is Global Fight League. So this is a new MMA promotion. And on the episode before last, I kind of spoke on my thoughts on, Bellator kind of dissolving and my thoughts on PFL and all these other promotions. And I wanted to kind of go a little deeper on that because I didn't really plan that episode very much. So I have notes with me and I kind of want to just go a little deeper on that topic. But basically, Global Fight League launches April of 2025, and it was founded by Darren Owen, and he has worked with, I guess, like a bunch of professional sports leagues. He used to be involved with World Series of Fighting. He used to be involved in that, and he apparently had, according to an interview with, I believe it might have been Ariel Helwani, is where he talked about this. So he had a conflict with Ali Abdelaziz in that organization, so I believe that was like part of the reason for his departure from that or whatever happened. I'm not super familiar with the World Series of Fighting, so I'm not going to speak too much on that, but I do know that he was involved in that, and he's been involved with other MMA promotions in the past and was involved with other professional sports. So his point of view, according to the interviews that I've seen, just hearing him talk. Also, if you haven't seen it yet, Mike Heck from MMA Fighting did a phenomenal job interviewing him on his platform on MMA Fighting. On their YouTube channel, they did a town hall, and Mike interviewed him for, I don't know, probably an hour or so, and got a lot of great information. So I am going to kind of reference some of that in this episode, and I just want to make sure to give credit to Mike because he's doing a phenomenal job with a lot of this stuff. And those town halls are really, really helpful. So shout out to him. So basically, Darren Owen wants to make MMA more like the other professional sports, which makes total sense. And I agree with that in some aspects. And I'm going to kind of get into that a little bit later, my thoughts on that. But that's basically what he's looking to do. And he wants the fighters to get paid more. And, that's great. That's what they all say, though. That's what they have all said. So I just, I need to see it before I believe it, I think. But I am optimistic about it. It's just I need to see it. I need to see what the fighters are making. I need to see, because the UFC isn't hiding the fighter pay. They're disclosing all of that. So I hope that will be the same thing where we'll be able to know how much they're getting paid. So that way they can't just say they're getting paid more. We can actually see the proof. So I would like to see that and be able to compare it. It's not fair to compare Israel Adesanya to Shamil Gaziev. I'm just going to use him as an example because they're fighting on the same card. So clearly those two guys should not be making the same amount of money. Okay? Like, obviously. So you have to compare the pay to somebody who's on their level. So a comparative fighter that's in the UFC compared to somebody in GFL, I want to know, are they actually paying them more based on their talent, skill, ranking, all that stuff? And then also he says that they are going to, well, they already did the draft, so now they have the teams. And the teams, from what I understand, is supposed to eventually be like a franchise. So there's 6 teams right now. There's 6 cities. They have London, Dubai, Sao Paulo, Miami, LA, and New York. And the concept is eventually, once they, I guess, prove the concept and once they build the organization to the point that they can franchise these teams. So there could be a potential for them to create franchises and create teams in other cities. And then those would be not necessarily a separate entity, but it would be like if you opened a Chick-fil-A franchise, or I guess a better comparison would be like if you owned, like Mark Cuban owned the Dallas Mavericks, you know, something like that. So it would be similar to how they do it in professional sports. And so it would be like, okay, somebody in Austin, Texas, like I'm in Austin, Texas right now, so I'm going to use this as an example. So it's like, let's say I had the money and I wanted to create a sports franchise and I want to get involved in MMA. Instead of starting my own promotion, I can just go to Global Fight League, say, you know what, I want to start my team, the Austin Annihilators, or whatever the heck it would be called, something silly, I don't know. And then I can create my own franchise within their company. So that is kind of cool. If it works and if it's profitable, I think it's cool. My question is always, where is the money going to come from? Because right now I believe it is self-funded by the owners. To my knowledge, that's what's going on. I don't know if they're going to get additional funding or how they're going to be able to do all this, because it does look like they're pouring a lot of money into it right away. They hired Box to Box Films as their marketing people, he had said in the town hall, which is great. You know, they do a great job with storytelling, and I think that's what we need. Now, is that what we need right away before we've proven the concept? Do we need to invest all this money right away? I don't know if that's the answer. And I know you have to spend money to make money, and you should spend money, but I think a majority of the money should go to the fighters who are fighting, not necessarily towards all the other stuff. Unless it makes sense profit-wise, I guess. So I don't know what their numbers are. I don't know what they're expecting to do. I don't know what the gate's going to be. I don't know if they're doing pay-per-view. I don't know how all of this is going to work. But without a significant funding source from pay-per-views or from some type of TV network deal, I'm just a little concerned about how they're going to make money. In the beginning, I think they're going to be fine once they get going after a few years. I do think that they'll be able to make money, you know, once they have different teams in different cities and all that. I think, yeah. I just don't know how they're going to make money right now, because I've just seen so much in this sport. I've seen so many promotions that I thought were going to do really well and then kind of flopped. And I just know how hard it is to make money in this also. So we'll see. We'll see. Hopefully they have a really solid plan, and hopefully they have their numbers really dialed in. Otherwise, it could be a disaster, and I hope it's not. I hope for the best, because I would like to see something that helps fighters, but it seems like every time a new promotion comes along, they always say the same things, but then it's like, where's the money going to come from? Now, I do think Darren has a lot of knowledge on like marketing, promotion, and running an MMA promotion. I don't think he has any issues with that. I don't know how this is going to do, especially with them kind of trying to be a competitor with the UFC is what it seems to me like they're doing. So I don't know. I don't know. One thing that I do think might help is they have different weight classes. So some of them are basically catch weight if you were to put them in the UFC. They also have a 110-pound atom weight division for women. So I do think this is a great thing for female fighters, because I think that this could help give them another platform to kind of bounce from. But I think at some point it will still end up being a feeder organization for the UFC, unless the UFC goes a completely different direction. So I think the team concept is interesting. I think that's pretty much the same thing that PFL is doing. It's a little bit different with like the franchise model that kind of changes things a little bit. So it's different, but it's still kind of the same experience as far as the fan experience. And I'm just not sure that is what MMA fans are looking for. I do think it could appeal to sports fans. People who watch NFL and watch whatever, there's a Sunday or Saturday or whatever day they have these events on, and they don't have anything to watch, yeah, they'll probably tune into this, sure. But I just don't know, I guess, if that's what MMA fans want. I don't think this appeals to MMA fans. And I'm talking your casual fan, your diehard fan. I think it appeals to fighters, for sure, just like Bellator did, just like PFL did, but you have to think of the fan perspective too. Because if it's not interesting to the fans, if it's not appealing to the fans, then it's not going to help the fighters in the long run. Because the fighters, the money has to come from somewhere. So if the fighters don't have, a way to make money and the promotion can't survive, or they have to cut fighter pay, or they have to cut this and that, they have to cut down the roster in half. If they have to do those things, then the most important thing is treating the fighters properly, obviously, paying them fairly, all those things. That's the most important, because they're the ones getting in there. If you don't treat them right, then, you're not going to have the fan base that you want. But second to that is the fan experience. And I just think that a lot of these promoters are not aware of what the fans really, truly want. Because to me as an MMA fan, I think focusing on the quality of the matchups, I think the storytelling is huge. Name value is important if you don't know how to market, but I don't think it's as important as they think. As long as you have a couple big names on each event, I don't think you need a stacked roster full of big names, because I think that's just going to cost you a ton of money. I think focusing on the quality of the matchups is much more important, and creating names. That's what you really have to do. Create the names. Find the talent. Find the talent nobody knows about and make it known. Make them known. Help them promote themselves. So you don't need big names if you can create them, is basically my point. I think BKFC has the best chance of competing with the UFC right now because it's extremely entertaining. Their events feel huge. They have Knucklemania, but it's taken years for them to get to this point. And I think also it helps that the owner of that promotion, is a former fighter. He was a boxer before, so he has that perspective. And I think that they do a great job of appealing to their fan base. And not only are the matchups exciting, not only are the fights exciting, but also I feel like the way that they market it, the way that they use the theatrics, the walkouts, the weigh-ins, all of that is what is making BKFC successful right now. That is kind of what MMA is missing in a lot of ways. I do think that the Global Fight League, it's not going to appeal to the old school fans. It's not going to appeal to people who've been watching MMA for a long time. I think it's going to appeal more to fans that are just getting into MMA, and it's going to appeal to people who are more traditional sports fans. It feels very corporate, and so it's like we already have that. We already have that with PFL, and we already have it with UFC. I think something that's a little bit more fun and a little bit more theatrical, where they can have their sponsors on their shorts, something that's more reminiscent of Pride in the old days of the UFC. I think that's more what fans are looking for, because that's what we've been missing for so long. And I just don't think that this is really going to appeal to people who are looking for that. So that's my only concern, is that it's not going to appeal to the diehards. It's not going to appeal to longtime MMA fans. And it's not going to appeal to the more crossover fans who are into WWE and UFC. I think that those fans are also looking for something that's a little bit more entertaining and theatrical as far as like the production goes. I think what they did with the Inglewood fight card, what they did with the Sphere, I think they're on the right track with that as far as the UFC goes, but it still feels very corporate. And I think that's part of the problem. So I think kind of having something somewhere that fighters can compete and give them a big stage to express themselves, I think that's more important than making it feel like the NFL or making it feel like the NBA. Because here's the thing, MMA is different, and that's why we love it. We love MMA because it's different from other sports. I don't necessarily want to turn on MMA and it feel like I'm watching the NFL or feel like I'm watching the NBA. I want it to feel like I'm watching MMA. I want it to feel different because I feel like MMA is one of those sports that's very unique and individualistic. It's not a team sport, it's not. And so I think when you do spin-offs like The Ultimate Fighter where they have teams, that's very interesting. But I don't think creating the whole concept around teams is necessarily what fans are looking for, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So I do hope it's successful, and I hope that they are able to pay fighters more so fighters have another option. But I do think it's still going to end up being a feeder organization for the UFC. Because if you look at now, I kind of created a diagram of what I think, all these organizations, where they all kind of fit together. And you have the UFC on top. And I think you have to have one organization on top. In just like the NFL, there is no competitor to the NFL, right? So it's not like they have another league that's on the same level. No, the reason you want to go to the NFL is because it's at the top. You are the elite of the elite. And I think the UFC needs to be on top for it to serve that purpose. So is it a monopoly? I mean, I guess you could call it a monopoly in MMA, but they're not stopping anybody from starting an MMA promotion. They're not stopping anybody from trying to compete. It's just that they do it so well that it's kind of hard to. And if you don't have, the barrier to entry, like I said before, it's very high. And so I think that's part of the issue. And that's why, but I don't think it's a problem necessarily. I think you have to have one organization that is more elite than all of them. But that doesn't mean the other ones can't be profitable. You can still exist in the space. You can still be an MMA promotion. It's just you're not going to be the UFC. And that's fine. But I think getting back to what I'm saying as far as like the landscape of MMA and where they all fit together. So below the UFC, you have basically your international feeder organization. So I would say LFA, maybe even UFL, this new, new fight league that popped up. They could be considered in this because I think that's what they'll probably end up being, which is fine. And then you have PFL. So PFL to me is going to turn into a feeder organization for the UFC because they're not going to be the UFC. They're just not. So it's basically these organizations. LFA is one that only goes up. So you don't retire from the UFC and then go down and go back to LFA. That's not how it works. You go from LFA to the UFC. So that's one of those feeder organizations that is basically just for rookies and high-level pros that are just a couple fights away maybe from the UFC. And then you have PFL, for example. That's one that's kind of omnidirectional, I guess you could call it, because you have veterans going from the UFC to PFL, and then you have rookies going from PFL to the UFC. One that I think will eventually go to the UFC is Dakota Ditcheva. I think that would be a great fighter for the UFC to have on the roster. And then also below the international feeders, you have regional and specialty feeders is what I'm calling them. So regional would be something like Fury, which is based, I think, in Houston, Texas, or somewhere in Texas. And then Jungle Fights in Brazil. That's, an example where we've gotten a lot of talent from Brazil. And then you have what I call specialty. And those are just a couple examples. I know there's many more. But those are more regional, where they might pull fighters from other states. They might pull fighters, if it's in another country, they're mostly going to have fighters from that country there. So I would call that, a regional or a national feeder. LFA has LFA Brazil, they have LFA Europe, they have LFA in the US, so that to me is more of an international feeder. So right below that, I would put like a Fury and some of these other organizations that I've seen. And then a specialty feeder, in my opinion, would be something that's on this same level, same tier as the regional feeders. It would be something like the Olympics. Kayla Harrison, perfect example. Fighters who come from other sports. That to me would be a specialty feeder. The NFL could be considered a specialty feeder too, because they're going from a different sport to MMA. And a lot of times can go, from the Olympics straight to the UFC. basically. I mean, they might have to do a couple fights in LFA or whatever. Or you've got your Mizzou wrestlers, your Penn State wrestlers. That to me is on the same level as like local MMA. So amateur MMA, low-level pro MMA in like a Shamrock or an NFA. That to me would be on the same level as like college wrestling and other sports that might eventually result in an MMA fighter, but maybe not necessarily immediately. They might have to do some pro fights first. They might have to do some amateur fights, just like Bo Nickel did. So I think those are things that can fast track you without having to go through the same process of doing like an amateur career or doing, 10 amateur fights and then doing your whole, local to LFA and all that. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can kind of skip through that if you are coming from something more specialty. So if you're in professional boxing, for example, that's another example. Or if you're coming from boxing in the Olympics, if you're coming from BKFC, I would consider that a specialty feeder. And the interesting thing about that, Invicta also I would consider specialty because it's women's only. And that is where we see a lot of the women's UFC fighters come from. So now the interesting thing about BKFC, Game Bred Bare Knuckle, Slap Fight, all these different specialty organizations is what I'm calling them. Dirty Boxing is another one that's coming up. Karate Combat, I would consider specialty. So they're different. They're not MMA. They're different. But you can pull talent from those to go to or from. So a lot of veterans, they might get injured. They got bad knees. Let's do BKFC for a couple fights. Make money, still get to fight, still get to do what you love, but don't necessarily have the same training regimen and wear and tear on your body that you do in mixed martial arts. So people can go from BKFC to the UFC. They might have to, like I said, they might have to fight in some other local or regional promotions first, but they could go, pretty quickly from BKFC to the UFC. And then they can also go from the UFC to BKFC, like I just said, like a lot of veterans have done. Eddie Alvarez, Jeremy Stevens, those names. And then you've got Slap, which I think you could go from... Could you go from Slap to the UFC? Sure. I think that would definitely be a harder process because it's a lot different. But you definitely could go from the UFC to Slap. And then Game Bred, you could go from Game Bred to the UFC, absolutely. You could go from the UFC to Game Bred, so that's a similar one. Karate Combat, it's very similar. You could go from Karate Combat, start your career there, then end up in the UFC eventually. Or you could start your career in MMA, go to the UFC, and then go down and go fight in Karate Combat once you're done in the UFC. So that's kind of what I mean by that. So hopefully that all makes sense. So now it's like, it's kind of like the joke, where does Kevin Lee fit into this? Where does GFL fit into this? Are they going to be an international feeder organization for the UFC? That's what I think. That's what I think they're going to be. Eventually, I think once Dana retires and once the UFC kind of, if they ever, start to have a downfall, then I think they could sneak in and take the UFC spot as the number one, most elite MMA organization. But I think that's going to be a long time. It's going to be a long time before anybody can even have a chance at doing that. So I do think that their role for a while is going to be a place where people either start their career as a mid to high level pro, or where they end their career. They just signed Tony Ferguson. And we love Tony Ferguson, but he's definitely at the end of his career. And Tyron Woodley. He's already had he didn't even have anything left to prove. He was already champion. So, this seems like they're definitely getting the names, but it's like they're getting names that are already at the end of their career. So how much value does that truly have? And that could get expensive too, because they still got to pay the big bucks to those guys because they have a big name, and they should. They absolutely should. But I do think that they are going to be a feeder organization, not only to the UFC, I think also more so they're going to collect a lot of talent that leaves the UFC. That's, I think, what's going to happen. So I think the UFC is going to end up signing a lot more of the like first round finishers, the people who have, you know, a lot of followers, big platform. They're going to end up signing more people like that, more people that have entertainment value. And then I think that eventually GFL could be, you know, an elite organization in MMA. I just don't think that it's going to happen anytime soon. You know, this is going to take probably decades for them to get to that point, and that's fine. You know, maybe that's okay with them. I hope so, because you're not going to replace the UFC in this decade. You're just not. It's just, you know, until Dana retires, maybe. Then I could see somebody else coming along and kind of taking advantage of the opportunity. But until then, yeah, I think that they are going to be a place where UFC fighters go to retire, or a place where UFC fighters start their career. And they're going to take advantage of that platform and higher fighter pay. And then they're going to bounce from there and go to the UFC once they get to the UFC level. So I think that's what we're going to see. That's kind of my prediction for it, if you will. You know, I think it's good if they truly mean what they say and they're going to pay the fighters more. You know, if the fighters aren't making any more money than they do in the UFC, then there's no reason for them to go to GFL unless they can't get signed by the UFC. That's the only reason that it would be an advantage. And maybe they do need another place to go, you know, because the UFC, if they want to be that elite organization, they can't hang on to talent that isn't there anymore. So it needs to go somewhere, and maybe this is a better place for them to go. You know, it's a better place than, well, I mean, we don't have Bellator now, so maybe they can capitalize on the fall of Bellator. And, you know, they can be a better version of Bellator, maybe. I don't know. We still haven't seen the live event yet. It's going to be April 2025, so I am going to watch it, and I'll do a recap on it. I'll cover it. I'll let you guys know what I think. And then I'll let you guys know what I think about the future of the promotion after that event. Because I do think we need to see that event before we really can judge it. If you guys understand what I'm saying. So I'm going to end things on kind of a fun note. And we're going to blend the music world with the MMA world here for a second. And I'm going to talk about some of the best walkout songs that I think fighters could use. And then I'm going to give an example of a fighter who I think should walk out to that song. So here we go. In no particular order, by the way. I can't really rank them because I love all these songs. But these are songs, and I'm not going to pick the usual ones. You know, I'm going to pick some that are a little lesser known songs. And who knows, maybe this will give people some ideas for their next walkout and help them pick their next walkout song. So the first one, and this is actually the song I would use for my walkout song if it were me. And I'm going to give this one to Sean Strickland, so I think he would be the perfect person to walk out for this. A Good Look by Sturgill Simpson. This song, if you listen to the lyrics, so one of the lyrics is, everybody's worried about a good look, but they need to be worried about a good hook. Tell me that doesn't scream Sean Strickland. Like, if he fights Israel Adesanya again, I think that should be his walkout song. You know? Like, it would be fun. It'd be fun. It'd be kind of just, yeah, I don't know. He just seems like the perfect person to walk out to that for some reason. But it's a great song, too, and the intro is really cool, and so I feel like it would be a really, not necessarily a dark vibe, but it's a rock song, you know, so it would be heavy enough that I think if you walk out to it, you would feel, like, powerful, you know, you would feel, like, ready to go. I think it'd fire somebody up, so I'm going with that as my first one. So another song that a lot of people probably don't know, I'd be surprised if anybody knows this song, but I'm a Raven by Hiss Golden Messenger, I think would be a really cool walkout song. It's a very, kind of a chill vibe, but it's got a lot of blues. You can tell it's got a lot of blues influence in it, and also kind of a southern rock vibe. But it's just a very cool song. Like, I think it would be badass to walk out to that song. So, the fighter that I think would fit that song is Justin Gaethje. I think that he would be perfect for that song. Because he's cool. He's, you know, he was the BMF. So, I think you have to be a BMF to walk out to a song like that. So, I'm picking Justin Gaethje for that one. And listen to the song before you judge. You know, because you might not know that song, but I'm trying to introduce you guys to some new music. So, but listen to it and tell me that wouldn't make a dope walkout song, for real. Next song that I would pick is The Way You Move. And I'm surprised I don't hear more fighters walk out to this. I think I've heard maybe one or two in the past. But The Way You Move by Outkast, that's a fantastic walkout song. I think that would be so sick if somebody walked out to that. And I think the perfect person to walk out to that song would be Eileen Perez. I mean, come on. That'd be perfect for her. And plus, I love Outkast. Outkast is probably, honestly, top 5 hip-hop of all time. For sure. The next one is a song by J.D. McPherson. You guys know I'm a big J.D. McPherson fan if you follow me on Instagram. Lucky Penny is the name of the song. And I think that this song is if you know the Black Keys, it kind of sounds similar to that. I guess it's the closest thing I would describe it to, but it's definitely unique in its own way. I think Michael Chandler would be perfect for that walkout song. I think it's a powerful song. It gets you riled up. I think it would fit his personality, fit his whole vibe. He's from Nashville. J.D. McPherson's done a ton of work in Nashville. So I think that would be really cool to see him walk out to a song like that. And then the next one, this one is a song by Gary Clark Jr. and it's called Bright Lights. I think this would make a badass walkout song. I don't know anyone who's walked out to this. Maybe I'm wrong, but I've never seen anybody walk out to this song, and I think it's a perfect walkout song. So I think Aljamain Sterling would be a good one for that. I think it would be fun to see him walk out to something a little bit different, more of like a rock vibe, and I think it would fit his personality. He's kind of big now. He's kind of starting to get to legend status in MMA. So I think for him to walk out to a song as powerful as that, I think would be really cool. So I'm giving that one to Aljamain. And then next one is a Wu-Tang song. So Preservation by Wu-Tang Clan. I think that Sugar Sean O'Malley would be perfect for this song. I think his personality fits this song. It's a little bit more chill, but it's definitely a deep song. And it's just the piano in the beginning, the whole intro, I think is really cool, and the lyrics are awesome. So I think Sugar Sean would be perfect to walk out to that song. And I hope somebody walks out to it in general, because it's a really good song. It's one of my favorite songs. One of my favorite hip-hop songs. So, yeah, I'm giving that one to Sugar Sean. We gotta show the ladies some love. So, I gotta do a female song next. This one is actually a song that I've seen someone walk out to. So, Ashley Pryor walked out to this in her Fight in Stand-Up Fight series. And you should have seen the way the crowd erupted when this song came on. I mean, the intro, just from the opening riff, it's just spectacular. And this song is called Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain. How can you not be excited when this song comes on? So I think that this song should be used by Kayla Harrison. Of all people, I think she would be perfect to walk out. So I think Kayla Harrison should walk out to this song. I think that would be amazing. So yeah, Man, I Feel Like a Woman by Shania Twain, I think is an epic walkout song for any female fighter, especially Kayla Harrison. So definitely I would love to see her walk out to that. And then the next one is Mr. Davalina by Del the Funky Homo Sapien. I think this would be a fun one for Aljamain too, but I think I would like to see somebody like Joaquin Buckley walk out to this. I think you need a big personality to walk out to this song. I think you need to be able to dance, have fun, and I could totally picture Joaquin walking out to this for some reason. I just feel like this kind of describes his energy almost. And it's just a great song too. It's one of my favorite hip-hop songs. It's very funky. Obviously, Del the Funky Homo Sapien, you know, always keeps it very funky. But yeah, I think that would be a fun one for him, or any fighter, honestly, with a big personality could pull that off. So, but I think you have to have the right personality for it to walk out to, because it's a very, you know, fun, vibrant, crazy song. So I think it would fit Buckley's personality perfectly. And then The next one is a Red Clay Strays song called Ramblin'. And I love Red Clay Strays. They're kind of a newer, up-and-coming country music group, or whatever you want to call it. And I think the perfect person for this would probably be somebody from Alabama. I think that would be cool for somebody that was born in Alabama to walk out to a Red Clay Strays song. I think that would be perfect. So I'll go with Trevor Peak. I know Eric Andrews, I think he's from Alabama. I know he went to college in Alabama, and he played football for them. But I don't know. I think he's from there. I'm not sure. But I know Trevor Peak was born in Alabama, so I'm giving that song to Trevor Peak. I think it would be cool to see him walk out to a Red Clay Strays song. Any Red Clay Strays song would be awesome. But I think that would be really cool because that's a really energetic song. It's very fun and kind of describes his fighting style. You know, he's kind of crazy, kind of wild. And I love that about Trevor Peak. So I think that would be the perfect song for him to walk out to. And then the last one, I'm going with The Payback by James Brown. I know Dustin Poirier walks out to James Brown, the boss, a lot. So that's a great song, obviously. But I think The Payback is another one that I'd like to see more fighters walk out to. I think the perfect fighter to walk out to that song would be Merab Dvalishvili. I think that would be so much fun because he's so full of energy, likes to dance. I think he would have a blast walking out to that song, or any James Brown song, honestly. But that one I think would be perfect. That's one of my favorite James Brown songs, probably top 3 favorite James Brown songs. So The Payback, yeah, I would like to see Merab walk out to something like that. I think that would be really fun. So anyways, I just wanted to leave you guys with something fun to kind of end the episode. I started off very serious, so I wanted to kind of de-escalate it into something a little more fun. And I want to start doing more of this where I kind of incorporate the music world with the MMA world, because as you guys know, I'm also a musician. I just dropped a new song on Spotify, so I'm trying to do both at the same time. It's difficult. It's definitely difficult balancing the two, but I'm going to try to do it. So I'm going to try to do MMA reporting and build my music career. So it's been really fun, and I hope to combine those two worlds together. I hope to build a community of musicians who are also fighters, and fighters who are also musicians, and I think it would just be really fun. Or people who just are enthusiasts of each, music enthusiasts and fighter enthusiasts, or MMA enthusiasts and music enthusiasts, people who maybe just dabble with the guitar or dabble with jiu-jitsu. Let's all come together and have like our own little community. I think that would be really cool. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm trying to do, but I'm also just trying to have fun. And I love walkout songs. I obsess over them. I always think about like what my walkout song would be, and I landed on A Good Look by Sturgill Simpson. That definitely would be my first walkout song. I'd probably change it every single time. If I was a fighter, I'd probably walk out to something different each time, but that would be my first one for sure. So yeah, just having some fun. So let me know in the comments what your guys' favorite walkout songs are. Let me know what you think have been some of the most epic walkouts. I'll name mine right now. My favorite one was when Anderson Silva walked out to Michael Jackson and had the whole outfit on, did the whole dance. That to me is number 1 walkout of all time. I don't think you could top that. So let me know in the comments your favorite walkout of all time and a song that you would like to hear a fighter walk out to. Maybe they'll see your comment. Maybe they'll get some inspiration for their next fight. So thank you guys for watching the Future of Fighting podcast. I appreciate all the support, all the love. And make sure, if you need some gear, check out my link to Hayabusa. I have a storefront in Hayabusa. That's another way that you can support me if you like my show and you want to kind of help me a little bit. Then anytime you buy something off there, it will help me out just a tiny bit. And you'll get some really awesome gear. So I use Hayabusa products. They're currently in my storage unit. I'm going to go get them in a couple weeks. Thankfully, I'll finally have my gear again. But great boxing gloves, great headgear, all that stuff. Anything you need, check it out. And you will get a discount if you use my code BREEBREE, or if you go to my storefront and find it there. Or actually, my code might be Brianna. I'll post it in the description. So check the description for my Hayabusa link. And I appreciate you guys. Have a great week and enjoy the fights in, I think it's in Saudi Arabia this weekend. So it'll be at 11 a.m.
my time. So I'll be up early, probably making breakfast before the fights go on. And it'll be fun. I'm really excited. So enjoy the fights, and hopefully Adesanya wins. And hopefully everybody that you want to win wins. And we'll see how it goes. So thank you guys, and I will see you next time. Bye.